Hi, it's Pastor Andy again, and another video for today. And today, I want to go a little bit deeper on something based upon some information I learned over the weekend about a concept that I mentioned last week, and that was the idea of not moving forward because of perfectionism. When we seek to be perfect, it prevents progress, as I mentioned last week. Perfectionism prevents progress. Well, there's another thing that certainly we know, but we may not really realize. And this was clarified for me in a very specific way over the weekend in a podcast I was listening to. And Dr. Henry Cloud was a guest on the podcast, and he's done some great books. You may be familiar, probably one of his most commonly known books is Boundaries. But in that book, he's a Christian psychologist, and in that book, he talked about the idea of an error, that there are errors in our life. And one of the errors that we are dealing with is right now. Psychologically, what we are dealing with right now is an error. And so this is the way he kind of laid that out in the interview with when you're walking up, and he said our entire mind is mapped out. Our mind is mapped. I don't know why the light's doing that, but anyway, forgive me for that. But anyway, everything in our mind is mapped. We have routines for everything. So the example he gave is imagine you're sitting watching television, and you get up from your chair and you walk to the refrigerator to get something to drink. It's something that most everybody who is watching this has done countless times. Well, imagine as you are walking to the refrigerator, you hit something, you step on something. There's a toy left on the floor. There's a recliner that's out a little bit too far. There's a piece of furniture that's been moved just just a little bit, and it may be so minimally moved that nobody thought it would make a difference, including us. We may have been the one that moved it, right? But in the midst of doing that, we have an error. Our mind has mapped, this is the route that we take, this is how we get there, and there is now an error. So again, psychologically, this is called an error. And the way that we overcome that is through intentionality. We have to remap our minds. We have to think, okay, if this is if there is an obstruction in my way, if there's an obstacle in my way, if there's a toy on the floor, we have to step around it. We have to step over it. We have to do something. So we have to remap our mind in that particular moment to allow us to get to where we need to be. Again, we need to be intentional. And so, one of the things that he said that happened, I thought this was fascinating. Tests have shown that when we encounter an error like that, our IQ drops 30 points. Now, think about that for a minute. There is between somebody who is considered a genius versus average intelligence, there's not a great deal of difference when we start to think about the overall IQ range. When we think about somebody who is above average intelligence to general intelligence, it's less than a 30-point difference. And so imagine that you're above average intelligence, and I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just throwing out numbers. You're above average intelligence, and you encounter that kind of error. Now all of a sudden, at best, you're at average intelligence, and you might be below average intelligence. Or if you're at average intelligence, you drop down to a lower level than that. And again, this isn't a critique on intelligent levels. This is just again, statistics are saying this is what, and testers are saying this is what IQs do when we encounter this error. Well, we are in an error. We are in a big error, a large error. And it's not that we can easily remap our brains, rewrap what is going on. And again, this is brain, and Dr. Cloud was specific to say this. This is about the brain, not about the mind. Those are two different things. The brain is a physical organ within our head. But the statistics have shown this. And again, because we are in this error that seems not to be ending, our brains are continuously having to remap themselves. And just when we think, okay, this is going to work, this is the path forward, this is the map forward, all of a sudden, data changes. We get new information. Something else happens. Right now, Here in Northwest Missouri, we're looking at another 6 days before we get back to a new normal, now, which is a strange frame. You can't get back to something that's never happened. I'm getting back to something new. No, we are moving towards a new normal. But again, what happens next Tuesday if Monday goes awry? Well, we're going to have to remap again. So one of the things that I took from this, and hopefully you're gathering this already, our overall IQ, our individual IQs, and our collective IQ for that matter, has dropped so much for a continual period of time that because just when we think we are ready to move forward on something, we get new information. Just when our IQ begins to raise back to where we would normally think should be normal for us, we have another setback. So intentionality is the key. And as I thought about this, again, I thought about Jesus and the disciples. And in Luke chapter 9, one of my favorite words in the Bible, and you find this in the New American Standard Bible, one of my favorite words, I think it's verse 51. Jesus is at the northernmost part of Israel. He's just been at Caesarea Philippi. He's about to head to Jerusalem for the final time where he will meet his death. And the text says that Jesus resolutely set his face towards Jerusalem. There is no better word of intentionality than resolute. He was resolute towards going to his death. Now, for him, that wasn't an error. For him, he knew what his purposes were, and he knew what his ultimate purpose was. And he had been preparing his disciples for that little by little by little. We see that very clearly, like in Mark chapter 8, he says, hey, I'm going to be going to Jerusalem where they're going to do all kinds of bad things to me. Chapter 9, he goes a little bit further. Chapter 10, he goes a little bit further. So each chapter, he's preparing them little by little by little. And I really hope this video, this lighting issue isn't a constant thing. I hope that's not bothering you. But anyway, but so Jesus gets to Jerusalem. And of course, their mind has had to be remapped all these times. Think about when Jesus calmed the storm on the boat, be still. And it was immediately still, no ripples of the water. It says it was just like a dead calm. When you talk about remapping your mind, if you're a disciple at that point, the healing of different people, bringing people back from the dead, all those things. But imagine the biggest error that they faced. The psychological error, as Dr. Cloud called it, and he didn't talk about this. I'm bringing this into the scope. When Jesus died, wait a minute, we've given up everything for 3+ years to follow you, and now what do we do? But Jesus overcame that error because, again, his intentionality, his intention, his ultimate purpose was not just to die. As important as that is for our sins, if Jesus remained dead, how do we know that he really was God? And if Jesus died again, Jesus died and he rose from the dead. Great, necessary. But what if he died again? Because Lazarus did, and Jairus' daughter did. And presumably in the Old Testament, the young man that Elisha and Elijah brought back to life, they died again. There's a couple of other examples as well. But Jesus didn't die again. He ascended. And so there is our ultimate fulfillment of our salvation, because Jesus not only died for us, yes, he not only rose for us, yes, but he never died again. Again, all a part of that intentionality. And those disciples had to process that. So they're in the upper room and they are trying to think, what in the world are we going to do? And then Jesus shows up. Error, mind mapping. Wait a minute, the door is locked. We don't want the Romans to come in. And here Jesus comes into our midst through a locked door. Error. Jesus says, you want to see? So we don't have to see. We know what happened. We know you were dead. Error, now you're standing right in front of us again. So the disciples had this constant error in front of them, and it redefined who they were. It redefined how they would live their lives. And all of these disciples who were afraid, who were they didn't get it right. Oh, ye of little faith, as we read over and over again. once they got it, once that mind was remapped and they realized, oh, this is what he was talking about. Oh, this is why Jesus came. Oh, this is what Jesus did. That error became cemented as a new map for them to move forward and to make a difference, which is still impacting people today. So how does that apply to you and I? Well, we're going through this error. It's not as significant as somebody coming back from the dead, but COVID-19 is an error. It is causing our IQ to change. It is causing us to change the way we think, to change the way we act. But how we respond, will we respond or will we react? And how we ultimately respond to this error in our lives, the psychological error in our lives, will make a difference on generations to come, just like it did for the disciples. So again, that intentionality that Jesus had, ultimately the intentionality the disciples had, that's the same type of intentionality that we need to have, that we need to be resolute towards our belief, towards living by our belief, not just to be hearers of the word, but to be doers, as James 1:22 says. So that's my encouragement for you today. And as I've said before, if you have questions or whatever, put them in the comments below or send an email to us at the church, and I'll be happy to address those. If these videos are helping you, hit the like button below or subscribe. Once we have enough subscribers, we'll be able to have the channel with our own name on it, rather than having this strange alphanumeric character for that. But again, if these videos are helpful, let us know or put something in the comments, especially any questions that you would like me to address in future videos, especially over these next couple of weeks. So until tomorrow, I bid you adieu.